Hello. If you're a Maga guy, you are screwing up. Take it as a compliment. You only yell at the good guys, most of you. But you're making a fundamental mistake, and if you don't correct it now, that's it. You'll do nothing but go from the Democrats back to the Republicans, and nothing will be accomplished. There was a profound change in our society in the 1970s. The communists in the 1950s said they would overthrow the United States in the early 70s, and they did. We used to live in a society where we were first normal and well-adjusted, then we made us a good citizen, and then perhaps if we chose we were a good husband, then a good father, and it spilled into home economics, and that's what made the United States such a magical place to live, and they threw all that out. In came the idea of that people who knew how to manipulate and intimidate other people were now sophisticated intellectuals, and the fact that they became professional consumers while everybody else did the producing, they caused people to have to work more hours. It didn't bother them a bit. Theirs was a chance to either get onto a maintenance level or cash in on everything and become the upper class in a peasant and property class society, and that's what they did. So we're going to stop for a moment and have some visuals. They're very short. The first two are gals from when the government was shut down. They're young mothers and they're beside themselves because they have to work ungodly hours and then still try and manage to take care of a child, and they just can't do it anymore, and they can't. And so I hope you'll pick up on the emotion. And the next three little segments, the first one is about suburbia America in the 1950s. If you'll take a look at it, you'll realize that the same people who built the houses are the same people who could afford to buy the houses. The same people who did the producing did the consuming. And that was unique in the history of human beings on this earth. The next two segments, everything changed in the 1970s. The lazy V, just like the letter V on its side, one went up and one went down. And up here at the top, the next thing you'll see is a house being sold in Malibu today. It isn't worth $1 million, it's worth $40 million. And people like Jane Fonda, according to the TV, live in there. And that's a good example of the people who cashed in on it all, how they live and how much it costs. They caused other things. The next you'll see is a segment of abandoned neighborhoods in Detroit. Abandoned neighborhoods, abandoned houses in the United States, in Detroit. And the one caused the other. Those people in Malibu caused those houses, abandoned neighborhoods in Detroit. So let's stop and look at it and then come back and have a talk.
I just finally got confirmation that food stamps is officially cut for next month.
About 2 months ago, I stopped eating dinner almost every night of the week so that my boyfriend and I could have enough food left over to have lunch the next day. This was before we were about to lose our food stamps. Mind you, we both work.
How do you do it? Ladies who live alone and who are single, how do you pay for all your bills and go shopping? I need someone to tell me, how do you make more money? How do you make more money? I am so tired of being broke. I get paid on Thursday. I did my bills for the next 2 weeks, and guess what? After all my bills, only have $200 left. How am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? How am I going to pay for gas? I have a Toyota Corolla and it cost me $40 to fill up now. How do y'all survive? Because I am sick. I can't.
That's enough to make the point they were there. The post-World War II United States had institutionalized the idea of the ideal citizen and the ideal society. All they had to do was polish it up. Those were mechanics and storekeepers and the professional home economists living in those houses. The same people that did the producing did the consuming. And that's as opposed to the communist housing projects and tenements. And that's as opposed to the class of intelligentsia and the upper class that controlled these things. It was doing great. It was working well. And they threw all of that out in the 1970s. The psychologists threw out the idea of being a normal and well-adjusted person. Courts threw out the idea of religion and threw out decency as a formal argument. And in came in the Darwin alpha male, the professional consumer who knew how to manipulate and intimidate people. He cashed in on everything, and that's the long and short of it. They threw out decency as a formal argument. So you're a Maga guy, we're going to pause and then have a sense of categories. In this segment, we're going to have a sense of categories. I know this is running a bit long, but there are things here that you can use, so let's go. Donald Trump ran standing up to a bum's rush. That was my big mistake. I assumed that people who hustle and con were inherently the bad guys. So do most people in the United States, but that's wrong. That was thrown out in the 1970s, and that's one of the things that has to be addressed. So we'll have a sense of categories. We'll impose decency as a formal argument and see how things look. So let's go. It's obvious the women's liberation movement got started in the 1970s, and it's obvious looking back that it really wasn't about being for or against women, but rather for women who were malicious and against women who practiced virtues. You were doing that. You pushed out the left-wing woke gals, but you brought in the right-winged my daddy was a female fighter pilot and those female judges, and they're the same thing, just different radio stations. Do you realize that you still threw out Melania Trump and the Catholic nuns and the Iowa School of Home Economics and those gals we were looking at earlier? So we'll have a sense of category. Melania Trump and those guys, they're over here, and those other gals are over there. They're the bad guys. Let's keep this up. There's immigration. This is coming to you from Tucson, and decades ago, it was common for the Chicano movement to not only say this was part of Mexico, but they were bragging about changing the demographics. Well, they're called the bad guys, along with the people that came in to smuggle drugs and flat out terrorists. They even opened up the prisons, didn't they? That's something Fidel Castro did to President Carter, and they're called the bad guys. While Fidel Castro was doing that in the late 1970s, you could go here to the University of Arizona and attend classes on how to bring Castro's Cuban socialism to the United States. So that group are called the bad guys. That young man last year or a year or so ago that was protesting in Los Angeles, they were protesting ICE and all that, and they were going to burn the American flag, and he stepped in and says, no, you won't. And he was adamant about it. You're not going to burn the American flag, he said. It was on YouTube, and it was quite popular. He's called one of the good guys. So you grab him, and you pull him over here. Remember, we're a bunch of Yanks over here. Race relegated to an endearing quality of your parents. You try to be normal, well, and just, and then a good husband and father. So he's not only one of the good guys, but do you realize how much danger that guy was facing? Normally, communists like that, if they could get away with it, they'd execute the guy. That's one of the guys you would send to a place like West Point. So you pull him over here, and we'll have a sense of categories. He's a good guy, they're the bad guys. Let me jump in on this if I could. I'm now a MAGA guy, and I'm going to say, okay, you want to be decent? We're going to be decent. Ever since that Mexican government overthrew the Catholics in the 1920s and the communists came in and took over, there's been nothing but despair and hunger and misery over there. So I'm sure that Mexican government will do the right thing. I'm sure they'll stand down, they'll get a garbage sack, and they'll go form a class of peasantry beneath all the poverty that they caused. They'll also do away with the Mexican peso and adopt the American dollar. They'll also give us back the oil and mineral rights, and they'll let us take control of all the factories down there. There are lots of factories. No one wants to work in a communist factory. It's sheer hell. In the 1960s, in the United States, people lined up to get jobs in factories. For one thing, they went to war to get women and teenagers and old people out of those factories. And the guys made enough money to support a wife and children. Remember, there was a famous example of there's the Ford motor plant. They made cars, and there's a huge parking lot, and there's hundreds of cars in the parking lot. That's because the guys who built the cars drove the cars. The people who did the consuming, who did the producing, did the consuming. And so we'll have a sense of categories. I'm sure that Mexican government will stand down and do the right thing. Now, you're a Maga guy, let's get a lieutenant commander type, and we'll get a leader, and we'll start to push that silly fence south, right? Yeah, good, I'm glad. Okay, let's keep going. The military. I was coming of age when all this was happening, and I knew guys who were real hot shot pros, and they would start to do things like join the military, and they would catch themselves and come back. And they would say things like, wait, I'm trying to stand up to all this. I'm taking orders from the very people I'm supposed to stand up against. There's something wrong here. The military takes orders from the civilians, and society was changing, and it was just wrong. I'm absolutely nobody, but I've apologized for not going to Washington, D.C. and joining the French underground and standing up to the civil rights movement. So you take the military guys that are about 50 years old and older, and you don't have the respect for them that you guys put too much respect in those guys. You make there you go. Along the same lines, not but rather and, you better start supporting the military guys today. You better get those female fighter pilots out of there and go back to the Air Force WAC, because all our lives are depending on those guys. Not just us, but look how many dozens of countries are depending on the U.S. military right now. And look at who they're fighting. The guy in Venezuela, the guy in China, the guy in Russia, they're all the same thing. They're, well, goons and tough guys. Not in any grand sense of the word, but in the very Barnum and Bailey-ish sense of the word. They're the same thing as the tough guy down the street, the gang leader, the MS-13 gang leader, and that sort of thing. There are also the communists, the prima donna intellectual government. They're also the same, that's the same communists that are running the universities around here. Okay, I get it. Couple more categories. There's the police. You treat the police that have some age on them. It's the same way you treat the East Berlin people treated the East Berlin police when the wall collapsed. The only reason that these guys get away with it is because there's guys with guns that insist on it. Along those lines, if you can't stand up to the police, then you go upstairs to the lawyers. Remember in the 1970s, our little anecdote, the criminal trial attorneys and the criminal prosecutors were at the very bottom of their totem pole of lawyers. And at the other end were real estate attorneys and tax attorneys, and there was one other. They made about 3.5 times more money. And I was walking and trying to come to, I would ask myself, why are these people considered stupid and naive? And the answer was they had the disposition of defending the poor and the oppressed, while these other guys at the top of their totem pole had absolutely no guilt. They weren't guilty of anything because they had no guilt in them. They had no empathy. They couldn't care less about anybody, and they'd brag about it. And they're the ones that cause all the poverty around here. In other words, the category of lawyers is not good enough. Now go upstairs to the courts, and now you're getting someplace. Remember in the 1970s, they came out and said there shall be no religion in government. They threw out religion, that last stand argument, that infusion, the Catholics call the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, that real thing that was thrown out. The attitude in the priest in the movie The Exorcist, there you go. And they had the sexual revolution. In other words, they let in malice. And they threw out decency as a formal argument. They made it perfectly okay to make money, even though it caused other people to have to work more hours. And right there, that's it. You realize that this is the United States, and everything we think the United States is, Melania Trump, the huge middle class, the idea of being normal and well-adjusted, the idea that malice and everything is outside of this. Okay, well, that's it. That's the courts we need to address, isn't it? And our own attitude. So we'll hit the pause button, and then we'll come back, we'll push the proceed button and continue. What's wrong? What do you do about it? And how do you do it? So what's wrong? They threw out God and country all those years ago. I'm for the violent overthrow of the United States government and replacing it with communism, says Angela Davis all those years back. And she's still around, putting her fist in the air and encouraging people to riot. And if I got the stories right, getting $30,000 a speech for it. We've stopped the bombing of the communist supply lines in Cambodia. Now we can go to work, says Jane Fonda, talking to the North Vietnamese communists. And she's living in one of those bespoke houses in Malibu. It just goes on and it doesn't stop. Those university professors, all communists, all saying things like, we have to get away with it because we can get away with it. And they won, and that's long and short of it. They had the sexual revolution. They adopted malice. They threw out decency as a formal argument. You couldn't go to courts in 1970 and argue that these people were causing other people to have to work more hours. You simply couldn't do it. And they threw out religion. You can have no religion in government. That's another way of saying they threw out the Catholic Church. They had a blank check, unlimited resources, and the only thing they threw out was that superstitious stuff about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and all that sort of thing. Somebody better have a second look at all this. And so what do? You go to the Supreme Court, and instead of the courts saying you can have no religion in government, you replace them with a Catholic. You can have officially a Catholic country. If you can't be a bunch of Yanks without being officially Catholic, then you're officially Catholic, and now you're a bunch of Yanks. The problem's solved. Now we have the grand deduction. Everybody wants, if you want to be a citizen of the United States, you have to be normal and well-adjusted, and then it turns into home economics, and home economics is what gets everybody out of poverty. How many farms are there? How many mines are there? What's the summation of household units in the country? And we're on our way. So what's wrong? They threw out those three things that make up God and country. What do you do about it? Well, you go to the Supreme Court and you replace those judges with judges that say they're only Catholic. How do you do it? It's a four-step process. The first is removed from the other three. The first is you come up with a course that teaches people first a sense of original sin and then how to stand up to a cheap pimp. They go together. We have our own little way of describing things. There's a priest on one side and the pimp on the other. And the pimp hustles, cons, manipulates, and intimidates people. And most people would agree that they're the bad guy. And then we have our flip-flop. You close your eyes, you fantasize about sex. You separate the act of sex from the act of getting the gal pregnant, which is a natural thing. And then you get into character, just like actors, and you realize how queer and perverted people who hustle are. That communist dictator, you get the idea. And go the other way. You play sex inside of getting the gal pregnant. You become normal and well-adjusted, and the same with fear and a few other things. And then you become a good citizen, and then you become a professional home economist and a good husband and father, and it spills into home economics. You're back in business. We're back underway. Well, that's step one. Somewhere in there, you'll know you know it. That's the famous phrase. You realize that you get it. You can't choose until you have a sense of understanding. And once you have that sense of understanding, it's a choice. So there's sort of two things there. A fellow has a desire to go back from the Democrats to the Republicans and Republicans to the Democrats. It doesn't work. So you straighten yourself up, you become a good citizen, and you come up with a course that teaches that, and then you choose it. It's just a choice. The other three stages go together. In the United States, there should be no arguing. And since I get a little high-strung here, so let me stop and realize that they did overthrow the government in the 1970s, and they did use incredible violence, and you're just going to have to face up to it. We'll pull a fast one. We'll get our young and big and strong to step up and take violence out of the picture, so violence is no longer an issue here. So you're a Maga guy. We'll stand up. You pick a date, and you go through those three processes. We'll grab our three-cornered hat, fife and drum, and we'll go down to the Supreme Court, and I'm sure there'll be no violence. I'm sure they'll realize the error of their ways. We'll keep that Clarence Thomas, and I'm sure the other judges will stand down. They'll give up the wealth and corruption they'll give up the wealth they accumulated. They'll get a garbage sack. Then they'll go form a class of peasantry beneath the class of poverty that they caused. And then you have a choice. You can either get yourself a Cuban cigar and do the same things they did, or you can do the religious thing. Go find some poor slob of a criminal trial attorney that defended the poor and the oppressed for no good reason, and we'll beat him up and throw a bucket of icy cold water on him. Then we'll drag him and throw him into that court. We'll insist he lives in a doctor and lawyer's house as opposed to the guys here who live in the foothills and collect rent from everybody. He'll never be as rich as those guys, but he'll have a much nicer house than the rest of us. I insist on it. I insist that he takes Wednesdays off and drives a Corvette, and he's going to play in that silly tennis tournament, whether he plays tennis or not. I insist on it at the point of a gun, because this is the most violent position you can take. It goes against the hardwiring of a human being. It goes against Mother Nature. It goes against the satanic. And so you do the rest. You follow that frame of thought through the rest of the government, and that's phase one. Phase two, you would go out into society, and there's a ladder in front of you that's upside down. And so you take that ladder and you set it right side up. Here in Tucson, somebody came in and bought close to 1,000 houses, and they turned them into rental property. And the prices of houses went up. So I'm sure he'll give back the houses, and you know where he can go, and then we'll sell the houses back to the home economists. Those gals we saw in the film a little while ago. The professional housewife has to have a house to live in, and she's going to live in that house. And if you're a guy, the guys have been neglected, you get to live in that house. If you're going to come across with a bicycle at Christmas, you get to live in the house. You have a job as a plumber, and not, say, a professional athlete. And you get the drill. Picture a 1950s house, and you guys are inside it. Go off to the side. Start with farming and mining. Then above that, manufacturing. Then above that, wholesale, retail, and repair. And above that, retirement, education, and recreation. And doctors and lawyers form a kind of ladder that holds it all together. And above that is a Catholic priest that causes it all to come into being to begin with. This stuff comes out of popes and monks and monasteries. It's a religious thing. It's the other intellectual position. And so, let's see, that's phase one. You go through the government, and I'm sure those judges will let themselves be replaced by the canon lawyers and the criminal trial attorneys. You have phase two. You go out, and the people who cashed in on everything will give up their property, and you know where they'll go. Then you turn around and sell it get the home economists back in there, go back to home economics. And then phase three, you build, man, build. You Darwinize the heaven, and you keep going until you get to a maintenance level, until you have a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. And that's the sort of thing you do. You do it very above board, very openly, and I'm sure no one's going to complain, right? Yeah. So now if you're a Maga guy, that's what you do. So I hope you step up and start making plans right above board. You'll face all that incoherent violence, right? So now I need a favor. If you're a gal and you're a Maga gal, I'd like someone to go back to being the home economist. Put yourself in those 1950s suburb houses we showed earlier and come up with a family budget. How much money would you need to come across with groceries and clothes and piano lessons for the kids and tennis lessons for yourself? Once the kids get into school, it's your chance to recreate. And if they're going to have a tennis tournament, you play in that tennis. It's for you to play in the tennis tournament. It's for you to recreate. And if you're a guy, how many hours do you have to work in order to come up with that budget? If you know where we are in sheer poverty, you know where, if you have a good idea of those two things, you know where to go. And it's just simply a question of going from one to the other. And so if you, there's a YouTube channel called Priest and Pimp. There's a Facebook group and a Facebook channel and an Instagram channel and hopefully a Truth Social channel. And I hope you'll call it, I hope you'll chime in and let us know. In addition, I'm trying to go on the air live on YouTube on Saturdays afternoons at about 4 o'clock Tucson time. I guess that's 3 o'clock Los Angeles time and 6 New York time. And then again about 12 o'clock on Sundays, New York time. And hopefully you'll start calling in and forming a group. If you'll come up with that group, and then you can get started. You can actually do some things. A couple of last thoughts that seem important. The Catholic Church came out and some of the bishops, and they criticized, what amounted to criticizing Donald Trump for the immigration stuff. And I would hope they reword their commercial. They sound just like years ago when they were standing up, when somebody was standing up to nuclear arms, and it's just a routine of a pimp. You can't have nuclear arms. You have to do something about the bomb, and they made us feel horrible. And some of them were priests. It's just a bum's rush. We should have been on our knees thanking God that we had the bomb and the Japanese didn't. And we should have laid down the law and said absolutely in no uncertain terms, nobody's going to build up a military. They can always join the United States. Remember, we should have been the world government. We were at a point where everybody who describes things like communism, we were the ideal. We were where everybody wanted to end up. We were in the place where the communists said they wanted to end up, and fascists and all those guys. And they wouldn't join the gang in the playground. Another thing, how about things like Ukraine and Taiwan? It's my understanding that Putin just got big and strong and he decided to start invading the other countries. It's my understanding that he invaded Ukraine because Ukraine has all the farm fields and grows wheat for all the area. And that was the for reals reason he was taking over the place. If that's true, that's not a good idea. And so you might make the suggestion, as if I had any right to make suggestions, that first that we would come out and apologize for how corrupt Joe Biden and those guys were. All we can do is say that they were corrupt, they were a deviation from the norm. And to make an example, to follow in the footsteps of this anecdote, there's not one thing keeping the Ukraine and one thing keeping Taiwan from becoming part of the United States. If they adopted the American dollar and insisted that we become Catholic, we become a bunch of Yanks again, then there would be the grand deduction. Remember, you go to a Catholic church, it's the same all over the world, and everybody is in a sense normal and well adjusted. So as you come out of the steps, that young gal in Taiwan and St. Louis and the Ukraine are the same gal, so to speak. And then it's like Disneyland. Ukraine has a house that's very much that beautiful architecture, and the same in Taiwan and the same in St. Louis. All three of those gals have no business putting their kids in a daycare center and working in the factories. The three of them should be at the shopping mall talking Valley Girl talk and preparing for motherhood and that sort of thing. In other words, everybody would be made better off. The standard of living for the average person in Ukraine and Taiwan and St. Louis would pop right up. And that's the road you have to walk down. And so it becomes a four-step process. Make America great again, you should make the United States the world government. Before you do that, though, you better be careful. All you've done is gone from the left wing to the right wing. Forgive me, I hope that Erica Kirk gal covers her ears and walks over to the side, but you've seen those right-wing Baptist preachers. All they want are $10,000 suits and $10 million houses. They're the same as Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. They're the same as the university professors and these army of characters with degrees in counseling. The only difference is those guys are the ones that are in power at the moment. And so you take a step back, you become a Yank, and get started. Anyhow, I hope you'll join this gang in the playground. I hope someone hears this, and then I hope you pass the word and start being public. Perhaps you can go on the television this weekend and tell us about it. Well, thank you for hearing me. I know this has been a little long. But thank you for hearing me. Good luck to you.